after Braum dies, you would think that he would want to rescue or kill the Razak, but instead he wants to rescue Arya for no reason other than she's really pretty and he has to save her. That's his motivation.
I don't understand why, though. Why?
And, okay, even if that's bad in and of itself, the way that he rescues her is by waking up in prison and she's in the next cell.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
We do discover when she's in prison that she's an elf.
Yeah.
It would be more interesting if he found out she was an elf before and he was like, the elves have been missing. I need to save the last elf. That would have been more compelling than, she's so pretty and I keep dreaming of her.
What if Braum, before he dies, he's like, you have to let go of this revenge. The only way that you have to like accept that you have more of a responsibility now that you're a dragon rider. The only way that you can become a dragon rider is by finding the elves.
Yes.
Braum dies. He has a vision of this elf girl. He says, okay, I don't want to save her just because she's pretty, even though, but I need to save this elf because she can help me become a fully fledged dragon rider. I can kill King Galbatorix, and then his reign of terror will stop him from killing people that I love because I want a family.
Yeah,
and he's threatening to kill Saphira.
We solved it.
Yeah, it's just
we
so
solved the
awkward.
issue.
Like the story's just falling on its face over and over again.
Yes. Hello and welcome to your favorite book podcast. My name's Mallory.
I'm Tanner.
And we're siblings.
We like reading books.
And this week we are talking about Eragon by Christopher Paolini.
Which is the first book in the inheritance cycle.
Yep.
And I love the word cycle for a book series.
I do too. It's very fun.
Yeah. It also doesn't say, like, trilogy, you, like, restrain yourself to 3, and what if you're the author and you're like, I want a 4th one in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
nice.
maybe he's like, oh, let's drop a book 5 10 years later. That'd be crazy if that happened.
You leave it open-ended.
Yeah.
I wonder why. I have never seen Cycle.
Me either, but I like it.
Yeah.
I wish more people would have jumped on the bandwagon there.
Me too.
Maybe they will now.
Maybe so, because this podcast is so influential. So many people watch us. This is the 3rd book that we have read for our Dragon Rider June 2024 Readathon.
Yes.
We read Ascendant by Michael R. Miller and Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Both of which we've already done reviews for if you want to check those out. Eragon is a book that I read when I was 13, maybe, when it first came out a million years ago. It's like over 20 years ago, I think. And when I read it, I loved this book. It is the book that began my love affair with dragon riding books. And for good reason, I would say. I have not read it since then.
Yeah.
So I was surprised by how much I remembered about this book. Like, maybe the first half, every single scene, I was like, ooh, I remember this very fondly and vividly.
Yeah.
The second half, maybe not so much.
Yes.
But we'll get into that.
Yeah.
You've also read this when you were very young,
I read this when I was in middle school, and it also started my love affair with Dragon Rider books.
So it was the first Dragon Rider book you read?
I think it was the first one I read.
And I should amend my statement too, but go ahead.
Yeah. It led me to the Wings of Fire series that I read with one of my friends, Regan, and it led me to His Majesty's Dragon, which will be doing. Wow.
Which we will be doing.
We will be reading at the end of this month, and then like Here There Be Dragons by Mark Owen. I love that one too. I read this book, and I read the first 3 like back to back. I binged all of them so much that when I was rereading this, I thought events that happened in 2 and 3 happened in book 1, and I kept on waiting for them. And then I was like, oh, book 1 is a little bit slower than I remembered because I had devoured them so quickly. Then I got to book 4. And it was so boring. I'm sorry. I couldn't even finish book 4. But I really enjoyed rereading it. There was stuff that I remembered, but for the most part, it was kind of like rereading it for me. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. I enjoyed rereading it. I think if I had never read it before and I picked it up now, I would be
You'd have a much lower opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reads pretty young.
We talked about this. I was a little bit shocked at how young the voice was. I mean, it was kind of written for our ages, so when we read it, of course, it didn't seem like that young, but rereading it, I was like, wow. Yeah,
I was surprised by that too. Later on, I remember so much about this book series, actually, because I did a similar thing. I binged it. And then when I was older, I finished the fourth one. I remember enjoying it, but that was back when I didn't read quite as much, so who knows? It's interesting to look at things again with a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective.
Yeah.
So it might not be as great as I remember, but I had a similar experience where as I was listening to this book, I was thinking about events of the other books that I loved.
Yeah.
That I found so much more interesting than what happens in this book.
Yes.
This book feels really tropey. It's like the Luke Skywalker's story if he were a dragon rider.
Yes.
It's very true to the hero's journey from beginning, middle to end. Like, there's a fun and games section, which is super obvious, but it works.
Yeah.
I think that's part of why the book works, is because it does follow that formula so strictly.
Yeah, there's a reason why people love all of those tropes so much.
Yeah.
Even if they are tried and true and used a lot, you still enjoy them.
You do, but...
At least I did.
I did too, but if you are reading into that genre as deeply as we are, then you start to see the flaws in sticking so faithfully to a formula.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you could enjoy Eragon on its own. Can you start the timer?
Every time I forget to start
It's
the
your
timer.
Job. Every time.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. When you read as deeply into the genre, like the dragon riding genre or whatever genre, as we are, then you start to see the holes in sticking so faithfully to a formula.
Yeah, and it definitely starts to feel like you've read the same book 3 times in a row.
Yeah, and that's what it felt like to me. I just kept comparing it to Ascendant by Michael R. Miller, and I was like, they just do these things so much better.
Yeah.
And there are reasons for that.
I don't know which one I liked more.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to ponder that.
Okay. I will say, just based on the characters alone, I enjoyed Ascendant more.
I don't know.
Did you honestly feel more of an emotional connection to Eragon than you did to Holt?
No.
Okay.
I just really like Saphira.
What? Saphira's nothing in this book. I'm sorry. We'll get into the characters.
I really like Brom too. Yeah. I don't know.
But before we get into the characters and comparing it to Ascendant, because at the end of this series of reviewing Dragon Rider books, we're going to do a master tier list, so it'd be really fun to get into that discussion.
Yeah.
Already I was tempted to compare and contrast.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, but while I was reading this book, at least, I kept comparing it to both Fourth Wing and Ascendant.
Okay, I will say one thing.
Yeah.
Eragon has more of a nostalgic love to me.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I've never
me
read
too.
Ascendant before, so it feels super different.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm having a hard time deciding.
Yes.
Anyway, continue.
No, that's a good thing to talk about, where it's going to be difficult for me to separate my nostalgia from this book, because I loved this book as a kid.
Yeah.
So many things about it inspired me to include certain things in the stories that I like to tell.
Yeah.
Like, we can go ahead and spoil some of the stuff that happens in the future books.
Yes.
But I couldn't stop thinking about, like, Eragon finally hunting the Razak, which is great fantasy creatures.
Yeah.
Like, finding those religious cultists.
Yeah.
I kept waiting for that to happen in this book, but he builds out that religion and it's so creepy and strange.
Yeah.
I remember those feelings when I first read about it as a kid.
Yeah.
When he becomes like half elf, half
that's
human.
what I kept on waiting for, and I kept on waiting for more of a connection between Saphira and Eragon and all of the other elves too. And I forgot that he doesn't even get to the elves in this book.
Yes, which is something that I actually liked in terms of pacing. If he had become like half human, half elf within this first book, it would have felt way too rushed.
Yeah, and especially because, I mean, it's a whole cycle. It's already planned out to be at least 3 or 4 books.
Yeah.
So you can't get rid of all those exciting journeys and exciting power-ups in the first book.
Yeah.
Your audience won't stay for the rest.
Right. So I think from an ideas point of view, Eragon is great.
Yeah.
The inheritance cycle is great. In terms of execution, I would also say it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that is in large part due to the fact that it is so formula heavy. The pacing feels brisk.
Yeah.
For like the first half. And then it kind of shifts, but I don't think it's strictly because of the tempo.
Yeah.
I think it's because of the character motivation.
Yeah, they change.
Yeah. But just to give a brief overview of what this book is, it is remarkably similar to Ascendant. Or maybe Ascendant is remarkably similar to Eragon.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate.
That's going to be it's going to come with the territory because it's in the same genre,
It's
right?
a classic dragon rider, lost boy who's a little no one, finds a dragon egg and raises a dragon and has to hide it for a while.
They lose their father figure / mentor halfway through.
Yep.
It's a travel log. Both books are travel logs.
Yep.
They both end with a big fight at the end.
There's training montages. I think Ascendants are better.
I do too, yeah. Yes. I have such nostalgic feelings for this book that for some reason I loved the training montage in Eragon as a kid.
I liked it too.
Yeah, for some reason I really enjoyed the sword fighting training with Brom, but we can get into that.
Yeah.
There's really no huge surprises for this book, I would say. It's just a good old classic in my mind, at least.
Me too. Like, when someone says Dragon Rider, Eragon is one of the first ones I think of.
Same here. And I think most people would.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised by that, and I'm curious.
They even made a really crappy movie.
They did. It was horrible.
It's because they tried to fit all 4 books into one movie, kind of.
Yeah.
It's not good.
No. It was atrocious. And even as a kid, I didn't like it, and kids have notoriously bad taste.
You were above the rest.
No, I was not. I liked a lot of dumb stuff. Let's talk about the characters.
Okay.
Shall we?
Yes.
And you mentioned that you loved Saphira.
Yeah.
Can you expand on why?
Yeah.
Because she plays like maybe 2% of her role in this book, in my opinion.
I like Saphira because she's a big dragon. That's literally it, Tanner. I've told you my bar is on the floor for Dragon Rider books.
You just like every dragon.
I like every dragon! And I am not incorrect for this opinion.
Okay. That's fine.
I
you
just
can
think
have that opinion.
she's interesting. I guess part of why I like her so much is because of the world building around the lore of the dragons in this book. I like the idea that there's 3 dragon eggs left in this world, and they are waiting for a good person for them to hatch. So she's been waiting her whole life for Eragon, and once she gets Eragon, she's like, time to hatch, you're my dragon rider, I've been waiting for you.
Because you're the protagonist.
Yes. I think that's interesting. I like dragons.
You've already said that.
Blue, and she has
Point 1,
wings.
I like dragons. Point 2, she hatches for Eragon. Point 3, I really like dragons.
Yeah, I don't know why you're making fun of me. That's literally my whole personality.
That's fair. I would love to destroy your argument.
I will say, she's kind of a boring dragon.
Yeah.
I see why you don't understand why I like her. But the girlies
Maybe it's
know.
a bit of a nostalgia thing for you too.
Oh, actually, here is a good point.
Okay.
She's the only female character for the first 75% of this book.
Yeah. That's true.
And the other female character we get is asleep for the other 20% of the book.
Yes.
So I think that is probably part of it too.
There's some... Okay, at this point, we've given this book a pretty positive review, I'd say. Or at least a middling review.
Yeah.
There's some pretty big problems. Like at the halfway and 3/4 marks of this book.
Yes.
Which we'll get into. And I think of a lot of it starts with like the fact that the characters aren't super engaging or interesting. Like, okay, we're going to compare it to Ascendant. Holt and his dragon's connection. And his dragon's name is Ash. Took me a while to remember that.
I didn't at all, so.
It's founded on the fact that Holt wants to rise above his station as a cook. And Ash, when he was born, before he even hatched, the dragons chose him as unworthy to live because he's not whole. And so when Ash is born, he's blind. And so the two of them have this emotional connection founded on like, they both can relate to each other on an emotional level. And they both believe that they have more potential than what other people say they can achieve. There's at least something more there between those two, in my opinion, just on that basis alone. In this book, Eragon, he's a farm boy. And what does he want? I don't know.
Nothing.
He doesn't really want anything.
He wants to provide for his family, but so do the other 2 members of his family, so that doesn't make him stand out.
Yeah. He wants to know who his parents are, but that's not really an important part of his character arc. It's literally mentioned in like the first chapter.
And then
it would be nice to know what my heritage was, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no deep emotional conflict. Mm-hmm. Not even a deep emotional conflict. There's no emotional or internal conflict for Eragon.
His uncle who raised him is a little mean, but Eragon's
he's stern. He's not even mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's nothing driving.
There's a little bit of a relationship conflict, you're right, between him and his cousin, too, Roran, who's growing up, and he moves to a town far away for 3 months, and they don't talk to each other, and Eragon's like, I'm going to miss you, but I'm not going to say it because I'm a teenager.
I'm a boy!
Yeah, I guess so. So that's kind of it for Eragon.
Yeah.
He's just not interesting to me. And his relationship with Saphira, which you would think would be like the most important relationship in a dragon writing book, has nothing.
It's just like they're besties. End of the sentence. There's not a lot of growth. There's not a lot of sacrifice for each other, really.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's boring.
Yeah.
It's good. It's boring.
It's boring. But I think when I was 15, I wasn't looking for much emotional depth in my stories. Not to say that I wouldn't have loved it if I had it.
Yeah.
But I hadn't read very many books, right? I was just a kid.
Yeah.
And so I was comparing Eragon to nothing.
Yeah.
Right? So now that I've read all these other books, I'm like, but you can have so much more compassion for your character, so much more empathy than, his uncle dies.
Yeah.
And now he wants revenge.
Yeah.
And that's a fine character motivation, but if that's the only thing that's there for him, it's not going to take you very long. It's not going to take you very far, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't. His motivations change halfway through the book.
Yeah, which is strange.
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird change too.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, we're dropping that.
Right. Like, why does Saphira choose to hatch for him? We don't know. He just does.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. She hatches for him because he's the protagonist.
Yes.
And that's a really limp, right? Like, I want something more.
A reason.
I want a reason.
We've talked about this a couple times in some other episodes. I don't remember exactly which one. But character relationships need to have more background and dense history than just, we hate each other. Why?
Yes.
Or something like that. And it goes the same for, we're Dragon Rider and Rider.
Absolutely.
Why?
Yeah.
What led you to that? Are you the descendant from blah, 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 blah? Are you of worthy blood? Are you a really, really kind person? Like,
yes. And if you are a really kind person, it's the difference between telling and showing. And when you're establishing such an important relationship, like this is the most important relationship in this book, or at least it should be.
It should be. And it is for every other Dragon Rider book, too.
Yes.
At least I think it should be, too.
I do, too. Fourth Wing breaks that mold, and I'm okay with that. But that's because she has a different take on how dragons are perceived in that world.
Yeah.
The most important relationships are the relationships with her friends. In this book, the most important relationship is ostensibly Eragon and Saphira. And you need to show us why that is the case. Yeah. Why do they have such a strong connection? Eragon, he's a noble and just person, I guess, but they just assume that. Like, they don't show us that.
Yeah.
We'll use Hunger Games as an example. Hunger Games is brilliant. The introduction is perfect. Katniss wants to protect her family. Her sister is chosen to become
the next tribute in the Hunger Games.
Thank you. And she volunteers for her sister.
Yeah.
Tons of empathy for Katniss and for Prim and her family. And she shows us how she's a hero. Yeah. You need that moment where Eragon protects Saphira. Yeah. Like, he sells her for some food, and he's like, oh, I feel so bad. And then he has to go back and save her when she hatches, and they're like, we are going to sacrifice this dragon. And he's like, I brought her into this world. I feel responsible for not taking care of it. I'm going to save Saphira. Yeah. You need that
would have
action.
been more driving towards that. Or even like, some bad guys come to try to take him and the dragon egg out. And his uncle gets killed in the crossfire. But he's not there for any of it. He's not present. He's not.
Yes.
Like, it would have been more driving if he had been there to witness it or tried to do something to stop it or was unable to stop it while he watched it happen. Yeah. Like, I know I always want my characters to be more traumatized.
I do too. But I know what you mean when you say that.
Yeah. Yes. It'd be more exciting as a reader to be like, wow, he suffered this thing he watched his uncle get murdered, that makes more sense for him to want revenge then.
Yeah. Then it happens when he's off screen.
Yeah.
Which is so boring.
Yeah.
You want the characters to act and to do something.
You don't want stuff to happen to your characters.
Yeah. And I think that
problem sounded weird, but do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's passive versus active.
Yeah. You don't want the events of the story to happen to the character.
Yes.
Just in a vacuum.
Yes.
You want the character to have some control or power over their situation. And I think that problem remedies itself later on in the book.
Yeah.
Slightly. But once again, I think it's because this book is so formulaic, where it's like you have to start with the orphan boy in a village.
Yep.
Just like Wheel of Time, just like Assassin's Apprentice, just like all these other books. And their parents die or, something happens, their village gets attacked, and then they have to go on this long journey to achieve their destiny.
And it's the thing that tied them to their home and their humble origins.
Yes.
Once that's gone, they're free to go.
Yeah. And I think the hero's journey, it was someone, Campbell, he was just analyzing these different stories and saying they all have these patterns. And now you just follow these patterns to tell a good story. But it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse, where it's like Assassin's Apprentice and Wheel of Time, sure, and even Star Wars, they're very formulaic. But they have those emotional connections to those characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to come first.
Yes, I agree.
Is how do you make me care about this character before we go on the formulaic journey? Because the formulaic journey is a natural consequence of understanding that a story is interesting because a character is learning more about themselves or the world, and they change internally over time.
Yes.
And so them, passing the threshold and having fun in games, overcoming obstacles.
Yep.
That's a natural consequence of just human existence.
Yeah, those patterns aren't just empty.
Yes.
It's not just boxes that you check aimlessly. You gotta have
they have a
context.
purpose.
You have to have something driving it.
Yeah, they need to work towards one very specific internal goal.
Yeah.
I'll use Ascendant as an example. Holt, we get an introduction to him being a cook and saying, I don't want to be a cook my whole life. He finds the dragon eggs being selected by the mother dragon, and she's saying, this one's worthy, this one isn't. He has an immediate emotional connection to Ash.
The underdog.
Yeah. And we see why he can relate to him.
Yeah.
Right? All that stuff is so important before we fall into the formulaic travelogue.
Yeah.
Now it's motivated with emotional content. And so that's why I feel Eragon is kind of lacking.
It's stiff. It feels stiff.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
All the other stuff on top of that I found was interesting enough on its own.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I really liked the world building and like I said, the dragon lore and the magic lore. I thought that was compelling and I wanted to learn more about that stuff. Especially because in my silly little brain, I thought we'd get to do that in book 1, and we didn't get as much in book 1.
Like the magic and the world building stuff?
Yeah, I wanted more about the elves and stuff like that.
Yes.
But they still do a great job with the dwarves and all of the different cities and the political empire stuff. And we still do get a lot of great world building too.
And a lot of good magic stuff too.
Yeah, we get some fun training montages about magic between Eragon and Brahm, which is his mentor for the first half, 75%.
Yeah.
Of the book.
I'd say halfway.
I like that. I like their relationship.
Yeah, so do I. Knowing who Brahm is certainly changes my perspective.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give that away.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. We'll just look at this book on its own. But I did feel like there was quite a bit of exposition up front.
There's a lot of exposition.
And it's not done very well.
No, and that's part of some of the pacing in this book.
Yeah.
It's just not great. And the exposition is part of that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's it's got its foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Yes, there's a scene where Eragon runs into a stranger named Murtagh. And he's like, tell me who you are. And he's like, no. And he's like, do it right now. And he's like, okay, sit down. This'll take a while. Long before the land was segregated between Empire and the Varden, there was you know what I mean? They literally sat down and just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of his backstory.
Yeah.
And that happened multiple times with multiple characters.
Yes, and it's not even just like character backstory stuff, it's world building backstory stuff, which is even more boring.
Yeah. It's just not done well.
No.
I'm sorry, it's not.
No, so, I mean, we can be honest about that. It's obvious that Paolini is a world builder at heart, to me.
Yeah.
They love creating new fantasy races, and I think they're objectively interesting.
Yeah.
Subjectively interesting. In my opinion, they're really interesting.
I liked him too.
I love the Razak. The Urgles are cool too. Like, he expands on them much more in the future books, and they're super interesting.
I love the Werecat.
The Werecat's really cool.
We get witches, witchcraft, other types of magic, magicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, but the problem is, like, even in the first couple paragraphs, Brahm is this storyteller, and Eragon goes to this fair to sell to the market to sell this egg for food. He thinks it's a magical stone, and he goes to listen to Brahm's story, and it's like, oh no, why are we starting out with the world building info dump like this?
Yeah.
It's like, long ago, King Galbatorix sees the evil empire, and it's like, why do you start out like this?
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much more interesting things you can do with your
better
world building explanations.
To do it too, and like talking about like text wise.
Yeah.
There were also like, you know, different authors have different writing crutches that they fall on, and one that I noticed for this book was Eragon would be talking in depth with Saphira, and then the sentence would be, Eragon told them what she said.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like something like that, which, I mean, I don't know how else you would do it. That is what he did. But every time I'd read it, I'd just be like,
J.K. Rowling does that a lot, too.
That's a weird sentence. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a personal taste of,
Yeah. So there are more interesting ways that you can explain your world building elements. Because unless you're the type of person who reads the Silmarillion for fun, and not to talk bad about that, it's just not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah. What
most people are looking for in a story is an emotional investment with a character that's going through something that's at least somewhat relatable.
Yeah.
And you add world building elements on top of that. Sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it's not. Like, for example, the Werecat Solumbum. And by the way, the names of the characters and the cities in this book are great.
I love them.
Which I think is a mark of his talent as a world builder.
Yeah. And I'm also grateful I listened to the audiobook for a lot of those pronunciations.
Yes. Even though the audiobook performance leaves a lot to be desired. Is that the phrase?
It's the one we're using.
Yeah, not great.
It's not great.
It's fine if you listen to it at like 3 times speed. But anyway, about halfway through the book, and this was probably my favorite part of the book, was in the middle. Eragon is on this quest to revenge his uncle, his adopted father, basically. The Razak, who are dragon hunters, are these cool, creepy, bird-like creatures, killed his family looking for Saphira, and Eragon is on a revenge path. So that's what the story's really about. That's the main thrust of the plot. That's what he wants. Halfway through, he meets this werecat named Solumbum in this magical shop. And Solumbum gives him this cool prophecy. And I remember reading that when I was a kid and feeling like, wow, the world has just expanded to this really big, mysterious place.
Yeah.
And I felt it again while I was reading it this time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so brilliant to put that in the middle of your story. Something to hint towards later on in future series.
Yeah.
And I think that scene alone might have been what carried me throughout the inheritance cycle.
Yeah, I love that scene too. When I was listening to it, I was just like, ooh, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
I love getting new magical creatures and having them still feel like they fit within the world that you're building.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you read books, it feels like book 1, separate arc. Book 2, separate arc. Book 3, separate arc. But he does a good job at tying book 2 and 3 and 4 in with that initial hint from book 1. And it makes it feel nice and cohesive. Yeah,
it does. And I don't know why it works. It's probably because, it helps tie those arcs from book to book more nicely. The primary arc is obviously, Luke Skywalker is going to kill Darth Vader, overthrow the Empire. So you get a similar thing here. Eragon is going to become a dragon rider and kill King Galbatorix.
Yeah, which I also love that name too.
Yeah, it is a good name. But once again, it feels too formulaic and it lacks emotional content.
Yeah, it would have been better if he is like, oh, Galbatorix killed my mother right after she had me. I've hated him from day one. Or
I think that does happen later on.
Oh,
it's something like that. I can't remember the specifics.
But it'd be nice to feel that pull from the beginning.
Yeah. And in this book, his arc really is supposed to be him accepting his role as a dragon rider and overthrowing the Empire. Yeah. It's not done very well. Mm-hmm. Something like Ascendant does that much better, in my opinion. In this book, it has a really difficult transition halfway through from, I'm going to get revenge for Garrow's death, and then I'm going to kill King Galbatorix because he's the source of all my misery. Yeah. It's really awkward. Yeah, it kind of feels like he falls asleep one day wanting revenge and then wakes up the next and is like, I'm going to go join the good guys. I'm going to go join the Varden. The Varden. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay. I wanted to ask you if you remember how that happened, because to me it felt the same way. It's like overnight, Braum gets killed halfway through the story and then he drops his revenge plot. Yeah, that's as much as I remember too, and it felt like... Okay. I also had another issue where there's a conversation between Saphira and Eragon of like, what do we do now? And he's after Braum dies. After Braum dies. And they're like, let's go to the Varden. And Eragon's like, I don't know where that is. And Saphira literally says, Braum told me where they are. Yeah. And then they don't know where it is and they have to wait for the elf to tell them where it is? Yeah. There's some weird plot hole stuff too. Like, Saphira is very conveniently wise and all-knowing through most of this book. Mm-hmm. And it happens right after Braum dies. So it's like, he knew at that point of the story, the mentor has to die. It's like, big emotional moment. And I like Braum. Yeah. And it is emotional, I guess. I didn't feel anything this time around. I was sad about it, but it kind of was like... That was random. Beating a dead horse a little too. He wouldn't let him die. It was a little bit... I was like, okay, they've been carrying his kind of dead body for a while. Not really dead, but it was sad. That's true. I was more uncomfortable than sad. Yeah. Anyway, after Braum dies, Saphira fulfills that mentor role where it's like a Sherlock Holmes and Watson relationship between Eragon and Braum, where Eragon has all these questions about like, how do you take care of a dragon? Tell me about the King Galbatorix and teach me new magic words. Help me sword fight, right? And then once he dies, he needs a mentor to help answer some of Eragon's questions. And Saphira conveniently is like, oh, Braum told me all these secrets right before he died while you were unconscious. And here's all the answers to these questions. Now I know everything. Yeah. It's like, what? Yeah. What? And it really is to the detriment of Saphira's character as well, because one thing that I really like in Ascendant is you watch Ash, Holt's dragon, he has a character arc. He feels young and he grows up throughout the book. Yeah. Saphira feels like she's a baby dragon, then boom, she's a grown-up dragon. Yeah, she even is like, ugh, Eragon, you're like a hatchling. You get into danger everywhere you go. It's like, I'm older than you. I can't stand you. Yeah. And it's like, I also enjoyed in Ascendant where... Part of the world building in that book is that all of the dragons have a connective history with each other. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Which I loved. I thought that was so fascinating, and it answers a lot of issues that you run into if you have a lone dragon by themselves. Versus, he's kind of hints at that kind of idea, but it's not ever concretely settled. It's just kind of like, oh, she knows that as a dragon. Yeah. You're like, okay. I wonder if Miller, the author of Ascendant, read Eragon and felt that same problem, was like, here's a solution. Yeah. Dragons are magical and they have shared memories. Yeah. So Ash is like, I don't know why I know this thing, but I have this memory from a previous dragon life that tells me the Scorn are like immune to whatever. Yeah. That there's no world building explanation for that in Eragon, but it feels like Saphira is thousands of years older and wiser than she actually is. Yeah. Which is a shame. Yeah, and I'd be fine with that if there was a better transition between baby Saphira and mature Saphira. Yeah. But same kind of thing, it just kind of is overnight. Right. And there's also another problem with her arc, which is, oh, baby dragons can't breathe fire until they're like 5 months old. And then at the very end of the book, she can breathe fire all of a sudden. Like, there's no arc there. It's binary, 0 to 1.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you have a scene where it's like, oh, the Urgals are attacking us, and she tries to breathe fire to save Eragon's life, but she can't, and then he uses Brazinger to save her.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
No.
So, it's so formulaic, right? And that's the problem with the story, where it's like, you don't... Okay, he wrote this when he was really young, so you can excuse a lot of these things.
Yeah.
It's interesting to analyze on its own, but just to say, there's a lot of things that I think he picks up on later on in the series. You can feel that he's learning as he goes.
Yeah, which is exciting, and I really like that in, like, as a audience member, I guess, because, like, even with music artists, if you find a music artist when they're young and follow all of the stuff that they release, it's fun to me to see that improvement. Like, I do like that.
Yes, I do too.
But once you get to the end, you go back and listen to the original stuff, and you're like, ooh,
wow,
you started somewhere, you know?
Right. So you can see, like, the seeds of, he gets better at character conflict.
Yeah.
Like Murtagh and Eragon. Towards the end of the book, part of what makes the book interesting at that point is he argued with Murtagh, and Murtagh has this mysterious backstory. So he gets better at that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I think he does get better at character arcs and making a character feel more real.
Yeah.
The world building stuff I feel like was always there. Like, he understands how to make a magic system interesting.
Yeah.
That's like most of Eragon's arc is him learning magic and him learning sword fighting.
Yeah.
But that's the only interesting thing about him.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because he's a literal dragon rider.
I know.
He's not just a magician.
Yeah. So
I definitely wanted more dragon rider training arc.
So did I.
More than just magician training arc.
Yeah, he feels way more like a magician and a sword fighter.
Yeah, and like there's a time later on in the book and Saphira's like, we're so much stronger now, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Are you?
I didn't feel like any progress was made.
Yeah.
Between him and Saphira.
No, and it's like, we're so much stronger after this happened, and I'm like, really? Because you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
No, neither of you said anything about it while it was happening. You know, like, versus, like, Ash and Holt's relationship, I feel like there's a lot more conversation of, like, we're not quite there yet, but we'll get there
We need to learn to
close.
fly together.
Yeah, let's try it, you know?
Right. Ash is blind. So how do those two fly together? That's an interesting obstacle for them to overcome.
Yeah.
And you watch them struggle with it throughout the book. There's like 2 or 3 scenes of them trying to learn how to fly until the end when they finally figure it out.
Yeah.
That's satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, we need more of an arc with Saphira. Just give her even one thing to learn. How to breathe fire. And have her fail at it a couple of times.
Yeah. It'd be a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
And it would make you care about both of them a lot more, too.
Yes, it would. You don't even need them to have much of an emotional relationship. Like, just watching them grow together in, like, that video gamey sense.
Yeah, like, I really liked the intro to this book because you did see a lot of that growth. Literally, she got bigger, but it was interesting to see that and to see their mental connection form for the first time. Like, I liked that, and it just stopped after that point.
Yeah.
Seems like he had a lot of balls in the air.
Right.
You
like,
know?
he's trying to master that art of storytelling where it's like, it's all about progress and arcs.
Yeah.
So it's like he does a little bit of a character arc here, and it's really interesting. But he neglects the world building arc for Saphira, and she doesn't feel satisfying when she finally breathes fire. Or the relationship stuff where it's like him and Saphira, not super interesting, but Eragon and Brahm, that is more interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like picking up little things here and there sporadically. Meanwhile, it's relying so heavily on this formula, and the formula is what carries the story.
Yeah.
So it feels lacking in a lot of areas.
Can we please talk about...
Oh no, speaking of relationships, we have to talk about
Arya!
this. Oh my goodness.
You guys...
I'm so sorry.
I just, for once in my life...
I'm so sorry to all the women.
For once in my life...
This was written by a 15-year-old boy, okay? It was written by a 15-year-old boy. I would have written a story like this. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about, like, treating women like real people.
Yeah, because you read books like this.
I know. It's not my fault. I'm a product of my environment, okay? No, I'm just joking.
There's a character that's introduced pretty early on. Eragon starts having dreams of a woman.
Okay, this is giving me like Maze Runner flashbacks.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. He has dreams of this woman who's locked in a cell.
A very beautiful elf.
She's so beautiful. He can't even think of anything else but how beautiful she is.
And she can be conventionally attractive. That's fine.
Yeah, but no, she's so gorgeous.
It's all the other stuff on top of that.
So
it just
gorgeous.
compounds.
And he has been seeing her in his dreams, and he talks to Brahm about it, and he's like, I've been seeing this woman in my dreams. And Brahm's like, that's interesting. Most people can't scry or see people like that in visions.
Oh, Eragon is a natural talent at literally everything he does.
He's good at everything. He doesn't even have to practice.
It's kind of annoying.
It is very annoying. Whatever. So he can tell she's in the cell, and he's so worried about her. And he's like, oh, Brahm, how do I scry? So he scries Saphira at one point, and he can see her or whatever. And he tries to scry this woman in the cell. And he does. And she looks at him.
And it's so intense.
It's so intense. Oh my gosh. And so he tells Brahm. Brahm is like, okay, and
he's like, I know why.
Yeah.
I know why you keep trying to scry her.
Yeah. But Eragon is like, maybe we should stop in every dungeon we stop by and see if she's there. And Brahm literally laughs out loud at him. So I'm glad that Brahm laughs at him for that. But Eragon's like, I thought it was a good idea.
And this is where like the character motivation stuff halfway through just falls apart.
Yes. So there's this woman mystery. She's left in the air for a while. Makes sense. She should be.
And yes, I don't have a problem with it if it's like he has a dream of this woman and he's like, that was weird.
Yeah. He's pretty hyperfixated on it.
But it's like so powerful for him, yes, that he keeps thinking about it.
And how beautiful she is.
And what he's trying to do at this point in the story is transition from the revenge plot to let's go to the Varden.
Yes.
He's trying to make that transition, and it is so uncomfortable because the linchpin is Arya, and he does not write her like a good character.
No, he doesn't write her like a character at all.
No. She's a human MacGuffin. That's what she is. It's horrible.
Gosh. Spoiler alert, he gets captured by the bad guys.
Okay, but I have a problem with that too. Just really quickly. So I counted. There are 4 times in this book when Eragon falls unconscious and he wakes up so that the next scene can begin. So it's so
that is
lazy.
A lot of times.
It's the same problem with like in the first part of the book where Eragon doesn't do anything to show us why he's a hero. It's the passive versus active thing.
Yes.
And so it happens halfway through the book here too, where Eragon he
uses a lot of power. How does he fall unconscious?
See, it happens 3 times.
I don't know, because it happens so many times.
It happens so often where Eragon tries to save someone. He uses too much magic that he passes out, and then he wakes up and he's in prison.
Yeah, he wakes up and he's in prison.
So Brahm dies, right? Okay, this is halfway through the book. Brahm dies. Eragon and Murtagh are together. Somehow, it's when Eragon is like fighting the Urgles or something.
Yes.
And he falls unconscious, or he gets hit over the head. I think he's attacked by an Urgle. He gets knocked unconscious.
I think you're right.
And then he wakes up in prison.
Yeah.
So after Brahm dies, his motivation is, this is where it's like a gray area where we feel like he woke up one day and then he's like, I have to go to the Varden. Where after the Razak killed Brahm, you would think he'd be like, now I really have to get revenge.
Yeah.
Where it's like he even has more of an emotional connection to Brahm than he does to Garrow.
He's like,
but instead,
bye-bye, hope you have a nice vigil in the desert.
Yes. All the Razak come back later on, and I really like the Razak and their plot line, right? There's an interesting race.
Yeah.
They're a fantasy race of creatures. But after that, he's like, okay, now I need to find out who this elf girl is.
Yeah, he's in prison.
What? Where does that come from?
Yeah, he's like in prison. He's like, maybe she's here too. And then she sees him. She walks across, all bandaged up and bruised and sad, but she's still so pretty, you guys.
Yeah.
So pretty, he forgot he was in prison for a minute. And he eventually breaks out / gets rescued by Murtagh, and they take Arya with them. But she is unconscious, and she can't wake up.
Yes. Well, the problem that I have with him, like, falling unconscious after every single scene is... after Brahm dies, you would think that he would want to rescue or kill the Razak, but instead he wants to rescue Arya for no reason.
Yeah.
No other reason other than she's really pretty, and he has to save her.
Yeah.
That's his motivation.
I don't understand why, though. Why?
And, okay, even if that's bad in and of itself, the way that he rescues her is by waking up in prison and she's in the next cell.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Also,
that is such an unearned moment.
We do discover when she's in prison that she's an elf.
Yeah.
It would be more interesting if he found out she was an elf before and he was like, the elves have been missing. I need to save the last elf. That would have been more compelling than, she's so pretty and I keep dreaming of her.
What if Brahm, before he dies, he's like, you have to let go of this revenge. The only way that you have to, like, accept that you have more of a responsibility now that you're a dragon rider. The only way that you can become a dragon rider is by finding the elves.
Yes.
Brahm dies. He has a vision of this elf girl. He says, okay, I don't want to save her just because she's pretty, even though... Woo! But I need to save this elf because she can help me become a fully fledged dragon rider. I can kill King Galbatorix, and then his reign of terror will stop him from killing people that I love because I want a family.
Yeah,
and he's threatening to kill Saphira.
We solved it.
Yeah, it's just so awkward. Like, the story's just falling on its face over and over again.
Yes, and part of why I hate her character so much is because she spends the next 25 chapters unconscious. She literally is strapped to the dragon because she's asleep the whole time.
Eragon's like, well, guess I have to give you a sponge bath.
It's so bad. Gosh.
That doesn't actually happen. I'm exaggerating, but that's what it feels like.
Yes, but he does have to take off her clothes to heal her wounds on her back.
Oh my god. It's so gross.
There's a moment later on, she has a tattoo.
It is the worst type of forced proximity.
Yes.
Where it's like she's literally date raped.
Yeah, it's
like,
bad.
Not really, okay, it's like she's being date raped.
Well, I mean, she's unconscious and he's taking off her clothes. That's pretty bad, you guys.
Yes, I'm saying that he didn't literally R-word her. You know what I mean?
Yes. She has a tattoo, and on a later scene when she's finally awake, I kid you not, she wakes up 4 chapters before the book is over.
Yeah.
And
this pivotal character.
Yes.
Like, she's essential to moving the plot forward after the halfway point.
Yes. And she proves herself as a very powerful magician or whatever. And he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but notice the tattoo on your back. Sorry, I'm so sorry, I was just healing you. I promise that's all it was. Also, could I get your number?
Can I get your number, please?
Every time she walks in...
Can I scry you later?
Yeah. Every time she walks in, he's like, her long oval face was so smooth and beautiful. And her hair was so black and so long and so beautiful. And her eyes are, she's talking to me and I didn't even know. I can't handle it. It's so bad.
Yeah.
It's just, like you said, written by a young person.
By a very young 15-year-old.
It's uncomfortable.
I mean, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but these are egregious character writing mistakes.
Yes.
Like,
that's why I liked Saphira so much.
The crazy thing is, like, no one else caught these problems.
Yeah.
Where it's like, wasn't there like a female agent or female editor or female beta reader who was like, hey, this is an issue?
The only female human character that you have is awake for 5 chapters.
Yeah. So I would say it's on par maybe the tiniest, easiest bit better than Maze Runner in terms of how they write female characters.
Yeah, I agree.
Teresa is like the prime example of a sexy lampshade. At least Arya at the end of the story, I don't know if you mentioned it before, she does something. She wakes up.
Yeah.
And she saves Eragon's life.
Yeah. And she helps with the magical battle and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, like, all that other stuff on top of it is so bad.
It's
like,
not good.
She's unconscious just like Teresa. She's beautiful. The main character feels this enigmatic connection to the love interest that they can't explain. Yeah. And the love interest, like, reciprocates it. Actually, Arya does not.
I don't think she does, yeah.
Teresa is, like, just in love with Thomas for literally no reason other than he's the main character.
It's bad.
At least Arya, when she wakes up, she has some control over what's happening to her in the story.
And she does feel like she has character, and it's not about loving the main character. So there's
and I will say,
a little bit of a brownie point there, maybe.
Yes, there is. And later on, she does have more of a character.
Yeah.
So, once again, there's improvement, there's growth. But, oh my goodness, there's some pretty bad mistakes in this book.
And just the writing about it, too, is so cringy.
It is.
Oh, it's so funny.
I bet he was, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for him. But I could imagine myself writing those scenes and feeling like, I don't want to write this, but every
know
hero's journey has a romance.
Yeah,
in
I
it.
can see that. I can see that happening.
So how do I write about an awkward 15-year-old thinking about this pretty girl he has a crush on?
Yeah.
You know, it is cringy.
It is.
But at least it's faithful, at least in my experience of like being an awkward teenager and having a crush.
Yeah. If you look at it from that lens, you can be like, okay.
I can see why that's the case.
Yeah.
Still, it's
still not great.
Yeah.
I always like when magic systems have a spoken word component to them. Mm-hmm. Like, I know when you play D&D, you have to meet some criteria in order to be able to cast spells.
Yes.
Okay. And
you're an expert on D&D.
I have played a couple times.
Let me jump in.
But I really like the magic system in this world is based off of like the original language of things and how the original words have power.
What do you mean when you say the original language of things?
It's like I don't know, the magic language. Brazinger is the word for fire. So if you say Brazinger and have magic,
so it's the true word for fire.
Yeah.
And once you know the true name of something, you can control it.
Yes. I enjoy that.
Yeah. There's a lot of... Okay, I can see a lot of the influences on this book. One of them is Wizard of Earthsea. I almost said Earth, Air, Wind, and Fire. The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Guin, which is... I haven't finished, but I know that the magic system is similar, where it's like you learn the true names of something and then you can control it.
Yeah.
There's also quite a bit of Wheel of Time in here, and some Lord of the Rings, and some Star Wars.
Yeah, it's not an original idea.
No.
But I enjoy it every time.
I do too. And that's where his strength lies, I would say, is in the magic, in the world building.
Yeah, and I also like that people each have a true name.
That was also in Wizard of Earthsea.
Yeah, I enjoy that, and knowing that
cool.
if you had that, you could have power over that person.
Yeah.
You know, it's like kind of similar to the fairy idea of don't give a fairy your real name, otherwise they'll have power over you.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like that's also found in a lot of different areas.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting, and I like people going through a montage of learning that new magical language. Mm-hmm. I wish there was more of that in Eragon. It kind of felt like he learned Brazinger, and then all of a sudden he could know all the other words.
Yes. There are pros and cons to a magic system like this. Mm-hmm. So one thing that's cool is you're limited by your imagination. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of similar to D&D in that way, which gives your magic system a lot of room for mystery and creativity. Like there's a scene towards the end when Eragon and Murtaugh and Saphira are being chased by this Urgle army in the desert. I also like that the setting changes quite a bit. Yeah. Just as a small little detail. It's something that's kind of underappreciated in fantasy books.
And they all felt unique and needed.
And I could see it in my mind's eye. Like, even the way that I saw it as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that tower with all the spires, different sizes. Really cool. Even the
Hall of the Mountain King.
Yeah, the dwarven
Yeah, there's a great
place.
reference to that song. Funny.
Anyway, I was saying that the magic system, it has a lot of room for, like, mystery. There's a great scene when he's being chased by the Urgles and he pushes this cloud of mist into the army. It's like, oh, that's cool. You can actually do that with this magic system.
Yeah.
It's very versatile. And it's conditional on your knowledge of this ancient language. I think part of what makes it feel a little bit unsatisfying is Eragon is a natural at it. And it's like, we didn't really watch him learn the language.
He doesn't even know how to read or write.
Yeah.
There's a weird reading montage.
Yeah. I actually liked that aspect of the story. It was something else for him to learn. Yeah. But again, he picks it up super quickly. And it just kind of fizzles out. Yeah. At least with the magic system. Okay. We're going to compare it to Ascendant again. But Ascendant does a great job of, like, he's learning magic and he masters one spell. And then at the end, he picks up just the very basics of his second level spell. Yeah. So it feels satisfying to watch him use the same thing over and over again. Fail, 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 succeed. And you watch him grow over time. Yeah. With Eragon, it's like the cost of using this magic is that he gets really tired and he has to eat his loaf of bread. Yes. Which is fine.
Or drop unconscious and land in the next setting for the next chapter.
Yes, which is also convenient for the plot. It's cool because you can do, like, basically anything that you want.
Yeah.
but it's kind of hard to understand the cost.
Yeah, I liked the moments when he was kind of like at a loss of what to do, and then he was like, oh, I know the word for water and I know the word for move. I can try to move this cloud down by combining those two words. Like, I enjoyed that process, and he goes through a trial to see if he's worthy at the end, and they're like, recreate this silver ring, and he's like, okay, I'll try it, and whatever.
And he fails.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't get to finish it because Arya comes in, she wakes up! But I liked being able to see his internal process of trying to be like, okay, if I fit these pieces together, it should have this outcome, but it's also really risky because it might not work, and it could take all of my personal magic energy, and it could kill me.
Yes, because the magic will draw upon your own energy.
And it won't stop until the magic is completed.
Yeah. So when you use it when you're untrained, you could risk dying if you don't understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And he expands on that in the future books and makes it really interesting, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have been more satisfying if he was like learning to breathe fire with Saphira. Do something to tie the dragon into this. Yeah, like the only time Saphira ties into the magic, if he's like, I can't quite do it, and she's like, here's my magical help, and then he can. Yeah. He doesn't even like say thanks or anything. I know. Whatever. He's like, yep, you're basically my battery. Oh my gosh. So, I don't know. It's a hit or miss book for me. Yeah. It was interesting to read again. If I hadn't read it when I was a kid, and if we weren't doing it for this podcast, I wouldn't have liked it. But I'm glad that we did it here because I feel like we identified some things about this story that we didn't enjoy while we were talking about it. And what we think you could do to make it better. Yeah. Which is always fun for me, at least. Yeah, I think it's fun, too. I also really enjoy rereading books that I loved when I was little. Same. Because it's fun to go back and revisit that and be like, oh, I've changed. Or, I've learned a lot about storytelling since I first enjoyed this book. Right. So if you're like us and you've read this book before and you want to read it again, I think it's worth it. I think so. I liked it. Yeah. I've learned a lot about storytelling since then. So it was very interesting for me to see, I can understand why I liked this as a kid. Yeah. But there's a lot of holes. Yes. There's a lot of things missing. It's true. But it's interesting to look at those and figure out why. Yeah. So that's it for today's episode. Is this one of your favorite books? No. Yeah. I can't say that it is, even though it's been on my mind a lot and a big source of inspiration for me. It's only because it was one of the first dragon writing books that I read. Yeah. And I loved it as a kid for that reason. Would you recommend it? Yeah, I think I will. Yeah. Go ahead and read it. But you have to read it through a specific lens, I would say. And that lens is that a 15-year-old boy wrote it. Yes. Is this one of your favorite books? No, I think I'm... but I thought you loved every dragon writing book. I do, but it's not my favorite book. Okay. Would you recommend it? Yeah, probably. Okay. But only if you read it knowing that the author is a 15-year-old boy. Yeah. Just kidding. There are interesting things about it. It's good. There are interesting things about it. It's enjoyable, especially, like, I still would probably recommend this one if someone's like, hey, I want to get into Dragon Rider books. Yeah. This would be probably one of the top 3. Yeah, I would too, if you want to get into it. Yeah. Definitely. Depend on the person, but Yes, this feels like the good book that you would segue into something like Ascendant. Yeah. For sure. I don't know. I think I would like to read the sequels, but only on the basis of I want to see if it's better, like if the books improve over time. Yeah, I think that'd be fun. Plus, I kind of want to read book 5. Thank you all for watching. Were you going to say something? I was going to say thank you all for watching. Thank you all for watching. Join us next week. We're reading Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funke for our 4th book in the Dragon Riders Readathon for June. Yeah. Please leave a comment. If you enjoyed this, let other people know. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to watch more. Bye. Bye.